Unpacking is a video game that explores how our lives are defined by the spaces that we inhabit and how we choose to fill them, following our protagonist throughout the wide variety of moves she makes throughout the course of her life. And yet, although the game is largely a soothing, comforting one, Unpacking offers a startlingly realistic look into our protagonist's relationship with her culture, disability, passions, and personal relationships without ever once uttering a single word. So without further ado, let's examine how Unpacking imparts this information exclusively through showcasing how our protagonist interacts with the world around her. Although we aren't given so much as her name, there's so much that we can determine about Unpacking's protagonist based on the way that she interacts with her possessions alone. Attempting to sort through her boxes move to move will reveal that she's an eclectic packer that doesn't place a significant amount, if any, weight on neatly categorizing her belongings, so long as they all end up in roughly the area they're supposed to be. She's a voracious reader with a love for bright, flashy color she never seems to age out of, and has a special fondness for all things a little nerdy. And while she generally seems to take good care of the things that matter the most to her and have the most sentimental value, even in the event they're damaged, she doesn't let them go. The biggest examples being her stuffed pig and piggy bank. Among these possessions, there are key items that cue us into our protagonist's greatest passions and current hobbies. In childhood, she's a soccer player, talented enough to have either earned an individual trophy or have been part of a team that won a championship. Yet although it's a part of her childhood significant enough for her to have wanted to bring to college, by the time that she reaches it, the protagonist appears to have devoted the bulk of her energy towards drawing and art. She purchases more art supplies, and appears to have made a jump from just passively doodling to actively trying to master the essentials, something we see her continue on to the point that she moves into her first grown-up apartment. Yet the loveliest thing about how our protagonist's relationship with her personal hobbies evolves is that as she ages, they grow increasingly more shaped by the people that she surrounds herself by. Let's take the roommates for example. While the protagonist is always drawn towards fantasy and video games, both of her roommates have a passionate love for role-playing games like D&D. And it's after she meets them the protagonist develops a love for them as well. Her female roommate loves cosplay and is likely one of two figureheads that helps teach her to sew, whereas her male roommate fosters her fondness of bugs, with her even being motivated to adopt a stag beetle after living with him. Even some relationships that aren't nearly as positive still leave a positive impact on the protagonist, with her picking up a taste for coffee after living with her first boyfriend. It's not just the items the protagonist acquires that are significantly altered by the people that she encounters, though. It's also the way that she chooses to interact with them, whether for better or for worse. After moving in with her girlfriend, the protagonist noticeably packs her boxes in a much neater, more streamlined fashion that aligns nicely with the organizational style her girlfriend prefers and demonstrates in the level that she moves in with you. Yet whereas the people that love her motivate her to interact with her possessions in a more responsible manner, you can always clearly discern the people that cause the protagonist to feel unwanted, with the level of care that she invests into her possessions noticeably declining whenever she's around such a person. For instance, after our protagonist moves in with their first boyfriend, her beloved stuffed pig starts to sport a noticeable tear in it after moving out. And yet after our protagonist enters a relationship with a woman that makes her feel genuinely loved, the pig is mended. Unpacking also takes the time to pose the question, what does it mean to meld your life with another person's? Unpacking beautifully depicts the do's and don'ts by showcasing what makes a successful versus an unsuccessful union. So let's talk a bit about it. There is one level that largely relies on a lack of space to depict a dysfunctional relationship. So let's talk a bit about the boyfriend level. Right away, from our first encounters with her as a child, our protagonist is framed as being a spirited, vivacious person. Her rooms are rich with color and cluttered with a wide variety of eclectic knickknacks, with her clearly having distinct artistic aspirations. But then, on level 4, we shift from being able to comfortably arrange and define our space in the way that best pleases us to having to share with a romantic partner. While not inherently a bad thing, the moment that we enter our boyfriend's apartment, we can tell that we do not belong. Our brightly colored baubles and random trinkets clash with his monochromatic walls and furniture, but moving beyond pure aesthetics, there's also literally almost no space for them. Our boyfriend has oh so generously taken the time to clear off a single bedside table and 2 small drawers, but other than that has made next to no effort to carve out physical space for us in his apartment, allowing us to assume the burden of painstakingly rearranging his already well-sorted belongings in order to squeeze ours in next to them. He's allotted us 3 hangers with which to hang our entire wardrobe on while spacing out each and every one of his many ties. But the example that tends to rattle the majority of players is that he has not taken down a single poster so that you can hang your diploma. The only space available is under the bed, meaning that not only are you expected to cluster and hide away the things that you love, but the accomplishments that you're proud of, because the only way in which you can even half enmesh your life with your partners is by making yourself as small as humanly possible. A facet that makes this level uniquely frustrating. Although our full understanding of this relationship is centered around the things that our protagonist chooses to pack and unpack, It's easy to infer how deeply upsetting it was because the only way in which the protagonist can stand to display photos from that time is by driving a tack through and distorting her former partner's face. And yet, although this is painfully relatable, what makes this moment especially sad to me is that despite pairing herself with a man that couldn't be bothered to make the slightest effort to carve out space for her, even after they separate, the protagonist still takes the time to ensure that he has a small space carved out for him. Yet the protagonist of Unpacking moves in with at least two partners. This man from a financially wealthier background that appears to have next to nothing in common with her and little regard for her feelings, and a Thai woman that not only shares her love for film and television, but her flair for the creative. And the differences in moving in with both couldn't be more jarring. Whereas moving with the boyfriend is a frustrating and disheartening experience on account of him providing you next to no space, moving in with your girlfriend is an invigorating and delightful experience due to the fact that you take care to do the exact opposite. Not only do you take the time to carve out the necessary space for your girlfriend to be able to express herself, but you take care to arrange the space in a way that complements the two of you. Even though your girlfriend's interests are markedly different than your own, she is traditionally feminine in the ways you are not, and prefers a slightly more revealing wardrobe than what you're accustomed to, but her clothing is displayed alongside yours. Her cultural relics take up an equal amount of space and are placed in prominent locations where they can be easily seen over being squirreled away under the bed. But what I like best is how the girlfriend's hobbies are displayed alongside the narrator's. Both the girlfriend and the narrator adore creating, with the girlfriend seeming to prefer baking and gardening while the narrator prefers drawing and writing, and with her comes numerous plants and pots. And as your relationship grows and flourishes, so do the seeds that she's planted in the initially empty pots when you first move, with them growing to their full size by the time you make your final move. Together, the two of you are then able to escalate your creative pursuits to the next level. By the time the pair decides to expand their family by having a child of their own, the protagonist has published her first children's book, a love letter to her lifelong fondness of fiction and artwork, the star being her beloved, newly repaired pig plush to signify a sort of healing. Not only this, but the two have been able to blend their finances in a manner that complements the both of them, with the protagonist no longer having to rely on mismatched hand-me-downs or cheap products, now boasting matching sets of bowls, hangers, and so forth. Yet Unpacking doesn't just document changes in the protagonist's closest personal relationships. Unpacking is unique in that it manages to beautifully portray the progression of chronic illness through the items that our protagonist gradually acquires, despite not depicting the protagonist themselves. And one of the things that stands out the most to me about this progression is that we shift from subtle, rather minor indicators the protagonist is often in pain to explicit signals after she experiences an extremely turbulent emotional period. The implication being this period of profound distress has triggered a flare-up. After breaking up with a partner that was, at best, cold and emotionally detached, the protagonist shifts from using a single type of medication and occasionally a jar grip to manage the day-to-day to numerous intensive forms of pain management. Upon having to move back into her parents' place, she has to add heat patches, hot water bottles, Tiger Balm, and yet another type of pain medication into her daily routine. And while though this emotional low very likely wasn't the sole cause, I have a special appreciation for how the game displays the physical toll emotional turmoil can take, as the two are very often treated as mutually exclusive concepts. And yet at the same time, it also doesn't fall into the trap of magically whisking away the protagonist's physical pain the instant that her emotional state starts to improve, with it showcasing the various mobility aids she acquires as she ages and her illness progresses. When it comes to depicting disability, we often perceive it as either being instantly apparent from early childhood, or as the product of a sudden, abrupt, tragic accident over something that slowly and gradually develops with time. In the instance of the former, we have a bad habit of assuming that because a person is disabled in the instant we meet them means that they always were, and there are many that have an even worse habit of speculating on what could have been done to prevent the disability. I deeply appreciate the fact that Unpacking takes care to show that our protagonist was extremely active in her youth, being a soccer player and active rock climber, showcasing there was nothing that could have realistically been done to stop it, it's just something that happened. And yet although this disability certainly impacts our protagonist's life, I'm also fond of the fact the game does not frame it as being the end-all be-all, striking a fantastic balance in depicting the ways in which she's become impaired versus the intrinsic joy of her existence. Our protagonist is disabled and has a happy, meaningful existence, because those two concepts are not mutually exclusive. Although there are many changes our protagonist undergoes, Unpacking does an unforgettable job of telling her tale without ever once showing her, making it an incredibly replayable game for many. Thank you for unpacking with us, and if you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And here's an extra special thank you to our Patreons. What we do would not be possible without your support. If you would like to count yourself among them, the link is in the description. Thank you so much for your time, and have a fabulous day.